On a warm summer night in 1993, Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena laughed and chatted as they hurried home, taking a familiar shortcut through T.C. Jester Park. They had no idea that in just minutes their young lives would cross paths with pure evil. A gang of 6 lurked in the shadows, fresh from a brutal initiation ritual. Fueled by alcohol and a hunger for violence, they spotted the young women, easy targets, helpless prey. What followed was an act so cruel that it would shake an entire community to its core. For over an hour, the girls endured unimaginable horror. They fought, they pleaded, they clung to each other, hoping for a miracle that never came. But how did the police track down those responsible? What shocking mistakes did the gang make that led to their capture? And in the end, did justice truly prevail? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling details of one of the most horrifying crimes in Texas history. Welcome to the Crime Series. I am glad to have you join us on another video. Kindly subscribe, like, and share. Let me know where you are watching from. Jennifer Lee Ertman was born on August 15, 1978, in Houston, Texas. She was the only child of Randy and Sandra Ertman, who raised her with love and care. Growing up, she was known for being warm-hearted, responsible, and deeply devoted to her family. Her father later described her as one who was wise beyond her years, always making sure to follow the rules and keep her promises. Jennifer had a natural curiosity about the world, often asking her parents about different cultures, music, and literature. She was academically inclined and did well in school, taking her studies seriously while balancing her love for music and sports. She was particularly fond of softball, playing in local leagues and impressing her friends with her athletic abilities. Although she had recently begun to embrace teenage independence, Jennifer never let it affect her strong sense of responsibility. She maintained a close relationship with her father, Randy, whom she admired deeply. She made it a habit to check in with her parents whenever she went out and always returned home by curfew. Her best friend, Elizabeth Christine Pena, was born on June 21, 1977. She was raised in a strict but loving household where her parents, Adolfo and Melissa Pena, worked hard to provide a good life for her. Elizabeth was known for being outgoing, independent, and full of life. She had a strong-willed personality, often standing up for herself and those she cared about. During her early teenage years, Elizabeth went through a phase of rebellion, testing boundaries and occasionally bending the rules. Like many teenagers, she had moments where she clashed with her parents, but deep down, she loved them and always found her way back to their guidance. When Elizabeth met Jennifer at Rqped High School, she found someone who balanced her wild spirit. Jennifer became a positive influence, and with her support, Elizabeth became more focused on her studies and her future. Her father, Adolfo, later mentioned that he saw a noticeable change in his daughter after she and Jennifer became close. She seemed more disciplined, happier, and excited about life. Despite their different personalities, they had a bond that was unbreakable. They loved listening to music together, going to the mall, and talking about their dreams. They both had ambitions of doing something big in life. Jennifer considered studying medicine, while Elizabeth had an interest in fashion and photography. They were just beginning to discover who they were and what they wanted out of life when one fateful decision changed everything. On the afternoon of June 24, 1993, Jennifer's father, Randy, drove her to Elizabeth's house. The plan was simple: spend time together, go to a pool party, and be home by 11:30 p.m. Their parents had no reason to worry. Both girls were trustworthy and had always respected their curfews. Later that evening, Elizabeth's mother, Melissa, dropped the girls off at the apartment complex where their friend Gina Escamilla was hosting a small gathering. The Spring Hill Apartments were a popular spot among local teenagers, offering a pool and a relaxed atmosphere. That night, the party was filled with laughter, music, and the excitement of summer. Jennifer and Elizabeth had a wonderful time swimming and chatting with friends, enjoying the carefree energy of the night. They were having so much fun that they lost track of time. As the night wore on, Jennifer checked the time and realized they were running late. It was close to midnight, and they knew their parents would be worried. The girls quickly gathered their belongings and left the party in a hurry, determined to get home as fast as possible. Rather than take the longer, well-lit route, they opted for a shortcut through T.C. Jester Park. The shortcut, which ran along the White Oak Bayou and railroad tracks, would save about 10 minutes off their walk home. They had taken this path before. During the daytime, it seemed safe enough, but nighttime was different. As they walked side by side, talking and giggling, they were completely unaware that danger lurked in the shadows. The park was mostly deserted, silent except for the distant hum of passing cars. The only people nearby were a group of gang members gathered under a railroad bridge. Drinking beer and celebrating the initiation of a new member, they were popularly known as the Black and White Gang. The Black and White Gang was a small but dangerous street gang operating in Houston, Texas. The group, primarily composed of young Hispanic and white males, was involved in various crimes, including robbery, assault, and substance-related activities. Their presence in the Oak Forest neighborhood and surrounding areas instilled fear among residents, although at the time, law enforcement had not classified them as a major threat compared to larger, more established gangs. Unlike organized criminal syndicates, the Black and White Gang had a loose leadership structure. Their hierarchy was based on violence and dominance, with Peter Cantu acting as the de facto leader. Membership required absolute loyalty, and new recruits had to prove themselves through acts of aggression and crime. The gang regularly engaged in physical altercations, vandalism, and intimidation tactics to assert control over their territory. The gang's name, Black and White, likely symbolized unity among different racial backgrounds within the group. However, their criminal activities were primarily opportunistic rather than driven by a particular ideology. The members often carried knives and makeshift weapons. Firearms were not always involved in their crimes. They saw themselves as untouchable, believing that their violent reputation protected them from retaliation. On the night of June 24, 1993, the Black and White Gang gathered at T.C. Jester Park, an area known for its secluded trails, thick trees, and lack of surveillance. The group had assembled for an important event, the initiation of Raul Omar Villarreal. In street gangs, initiations were often used to test new recruits. These jump-ins were meant to prove toughness, endurance, and commitment to the gang. The process was brutal. Several members would take turns beating the recruit for a set period of time, often until he could no longer stand. The more pain a recruit could withstand, the more he proved himself worthy of membership. Villarreal had never been part of a gang before. He was younger than most members and eager to earn their respect. He wanted to belong, to be accepted, and to gain the protection that gang life supposedly offered. That night, he stood nervously in the park, surrounded by the gang members, some of whom were already intoxicated. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of cheap beer. Laughter and crude jokes filled the night as the gang members prepared for the ritual. Peter Cantu, the group's leader, signaled for the initiation to begin. Villarreal was placed at the center of the group. Without warning, another member struck him, followed by another delivering a forceful blow. For the next several minutes, Villarreal endured a tough challenge. He was repeatedly hit and knocked down, struggling to stay on his feet. If you found this story compelling and appreciate the way we bring real-life cases to you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to uncover the truth and share these important stories. Like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. As the initiation continued, he was pushed to the ground where the group maintained their aggressive display. At one point, he attempted to move away, but the group surrounded him, reacting with amusement. Eventually, Villarreal, exhausted and sore, remained on the ground. The others, also out of breath, exchanged glances. After a brief silence, Peter Cantu stepped forward, grinning. He patted Villarreal on the back and said, "You're in. You're one of us now." Despite his exhaustion, Villarreal forced a smile and nodded. He had completed the initiation and was now part of the group. To mark the moment, the members handed Villarreal a drink, His first as an official member. He took a sip, knowing he had secured his place. As the drinks flowed, their laughter became louder, their words more reckless. Some of them were already thinking about what crimes they could commit that night. The adrenaline of the initiation still ran high, and the gang members felt invincible. José Medellín, one of the more aggressive members, leaned against a tree, smirking as he talked about how easy it was to rob people. He boasted about a time he had beaten up a man for his wallet, and how fun it was to watch his victim beg. Derek O'Brien, another member, casually flipped open a knife, twirling it between his fingers as he listened to the conversation. "We should do something wild tonight," he muttered. The gang members laughed, agreeing that the night had just begun. Then, as if on cue, they saw two figures walking along the railroad tracks. Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena, completely unaware of the danger ahead, were taking a shortcut through the park. As they walked closer, Medellín's eyes lit up. "Hey, look at that," he said. "Where do you think they're going?" At that moment, everything changed. What had started as a simple gang initiation would soon spiral into one of the most brutal events in Houston's history. As they attempted to walk past the gang, José Medellín stepped forward, blocking their path. Medellín was aggressive and intoxicated, and without hesitation, he reached for Elizabeth, grabbing her by the arm and attempting to grope her. Elizabeth instinctively pushed him away, trying to free herself, but Medellín only tightened his grip. "No, baby. Where are you going?" Medellín sneered as he yanked Elizabeth toward him. Jennifer, seeing her friend in distress, acted without hesitation. Despite being much smaller than some of the individuals in the group, she rushed to Elizabeth's aid, attempting to pull her away. But before she could intervene, Peter Cantu and Derek O'Brien forcefully stopped her, knocking her to the ground. Elizabeth struggled to break free, but her resistance only intensified the situation. Within moments, others in the group, including Efrain Perez and Raul Villarreal, got involved, restraining both Jennifer and Elizabeth and leading them further into the wooded area of the park. Both Jennifer and Elizabeth fought back with everything they had. Jennifer managed to scratch one of her attackers, while Elizabeth kicked in an effort to escape, but they were outnumbered. One by one, members of the group took turns restraining and attacking them. Throughout the ordeal, their eyes met several times. A silent exchange of fear and determination. The struggle lasted for more than an hour. Jennifer bit one of her captors in a desperate attempt to break free, while Elizabeth, seeing her friend, began to cry, realizing the gravity of their situation. Despite their efforts, they were unable to escape. As the group continued their actions, a grim realization set in. They could not allow Jennifer and Elizabeth to leave. If they did, they would be able to identify their attackers. A decision was made that sealed their fate. The two were led deeper into the woods, their strength nearly gone, but their will to survive still evident. Following Cantu's order, a tragic sequence of events unfolded, leading to their untimely end. Their lives were cut short that night, their final moments filled with fear and uncertainty. Their remains were left in the secluded park. 4 days after Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena went missing, their families were in deep distress. Their parents had reported them missing on the morning of June 25, 1993, after they failed to return home from a friend's gathering. The families, along with law enforcement and community volunteers, searched tirelessly for the girls, putting up flyers and hoping for any leads. However, no one could have predicted the horrifying discovery that awaited them. The breakthrough in the case of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena came not from forensic evidence or surveillance footage, but from a crucial decision made by a family member of one of the perpetrators. Joe Cantu, the older brother of Peter Cantu, the gang leader responsible for the brutal assault and murder of the two teenage girls, unknowingly held the key to unraveling the crime. In the days following June 24, 1993, Joe began noticing strange behavior from his younger brother, Peter Cantu, and his group of friends. The usually cocky and arrogant Peter seemed particularly boastful about something, laughing with his gang members and exchanging knowing glances. Joe overheard disturbing snippets of conversation, but initially brushed them off as exaggerated bravado. young men trying to sound tough. However, what truly unsettled him was the group's possessions. He noticed Peter and the others handling jewelry and personal items that did not belong to them. Among these items was a distinctive goofy wristwatch, something that seemed completely out of place among them. Joe witnessed Peter casually tossing the watch to his younger accomplice, Venancio Medellin, saying, "Take this, I don't want it." The carelessness in his tone, as if discarding an insignificant trinket, sent a wave of unease through Joe. As the group continued drinking and joking around in the days following the crime, Joe's wife, Cristina Cantu, grew suspicious. One night, she overheard bits and pieces of a conversation that sent shivers down her spine. Peter and the other gang members were discussing something they had done that they claimed would make the news. They seemed to take pride in their actions, showing no signs of fear or remorse. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, Cristina pressed for more details. The gang members, emboldened by their sense of invincibility, spoke openly about assaulting and unaliving 2 young women. Their words were chilling, delivered without an ounce of guilt. When she asked for clarification, one of them smirked and confirmed that the girls were now dead. Cristina was horrified. She realized that her husband's younger brother and his friends had done something unspeakable. Unable to ignore what she had heard, she immediately told Joe what had been discussed. Joe Cantu faced an agonizing dilemma. On one hand, this was his own brother, someone he had grown up with, someone who bore the same last name. Turning him in meant permanently severing ties and potentially putting his own family at risk. On the other hand, the details of what Peter and his gang had done were too horrific to ignore. After much deliberation, Joe made the courageous decision to act. He knew that keeping silent would make him complicit. He walked into the nearest Houston Police Department precinct and provided officers with a full account of what he had seen and heard. Joe relayed how Peter and his gang had personal belongings from the victims, including the goofy wristwatch, and described their chilling bragging about the crime. He also provided names of the individuals involved, helping detectives identify the key suspects. His report gave investigators their first solid lead, which allowed them to begin piecing together what had happened that night. Detectives immediately took Joe's tips seriously. By this point, Jennifer and Elizabeth had been reported missing for 4 days, and their decomposing bodies had just been discovered in TC. Jester Park. Though investigators had no initial suspects, Joe's information gave them the crucial breakthrough they needed. With Joe's statement, law enforcement connected the dots. The gang members had left evidence behind, DNA, shoe prints, and fibers, but now they had actual names and a witness who had overheard first-hand confessions. The chilling details Joe provided matched what had been found at the crime scene, further confirming that Peter Cantu and his gang were responsible. Detectives quickly secured arrest warrants for the individuals Joe had named, launching a series of raids to take the suspects into custody. The evidence collected from Joe's report proved invaluable in securing convictions later in court. Once inside the interrogation room, each suspect provided disturbing details of what had happened that night. Medellin admitted to being involved in sexual assault, a tragic criminal act against Elizabeth Peña, showing no remorse. He described how the group was instructed by Peter Cantu to ensure there were no witnesses. When questioned by officers about any feelings of guilt, Medellin reportedly dismissed the idea with an indifferent response. He later wrote to a relative, referencing his involvement and making a concerning remark about how things could have been easier with a weapon. Derek O'Brien reacted differently from Medellin, breaking down when confronted with evidence. His confession was particularly unsettling as he provided a detailed account of the events. O'Brien admitted that he and another individual attempted to harm Jennifer Ertman using a nylon belt, but when it failed, they resorted to another method. He also described how, during the ordeal, the victims exchanged looks of silent understanding in their struggle. Ertman fought back in desperation, while Peña, after witnessing her friend's fate, attempted to plead for mercy by offering her phone number. As the group's leader, Cantu remained the most defiant. He initially refused to admit any involvement, But after being presented with statements from others, he acknowledged giving the orders. He showed no remorse and even laughed at certain details, commenting that he had no regrets about what happened. Efrain Perez and Raul Villarreal confirmed they had both sexually assaulted the victims. Venancio Medellin, while not directly involved in the most serious acts, admitted to witnessing the events and later accepting a stolen watch from the victims. Each suspect's story aligned with the others, reinforcing the sequence of events investigators had pieced together. Beyond verbal confessions, police found hard evidence linking the gang to the crime. Jewelry stolen from the victims was found in the homes of several suspects. Clothing worn during the attack was recovered. A shoe print found at the crime scene matched one of the gang members. Medical examination of the bodies confirmed the assaults had occurred exactly as described in the confessions. The evidence was overwhelming, ensuring that prosecutors had an airtight case against the suspects. The detailed confessions, combined with forensic evidence, left no room for doubt in the minds of the investigators. The case was officially ruled, making the suspects eligible for the death penalty. Following the brutal murders of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena, the state of Texas swiftly moved forward with legal action against the perpetrators. Given the severity of the crime, the suspects faced charges of capital murder, the highest level of criminal offense in Texas, which carries the possibility of the death penalty. The 6 individuals involved, Peter Cantu, Jose Medellin, Derek O'Brien, Efrain Perez, Raul Villarreal, and Venancio Medellin, were all charged with murder. Under Texas law, those who played a role in the incident could be held equally responsible even if they did not directly commit the act. Prosecutors pursued the most severe penalty for the 4 adult defendants, Cantu, Medellin, O'Brien, and Perez. For the 2 younger defendants, Villarreal and Venancio Medellin, who were 17 and 14 at the time, Texas law at the time set the maximum penalty as life imprisonment. The trials attracted nationwide media attention, largely due to the brutality of the crime. The victims were subjected to prolonged assault before being murdered in a particularly vicious manner. The gang-related aspect, the involvement of a street gang, the Black and White Gang, raised concerns about violent youth crime and gang culture in Houston. Families of the victims attended every court session, demanding justice and ensuring the full weight of the law was applied. During victim impact statements, the parents of Jennifer and Elizabeth spoke about the devastating effect of the murders, influencing public opinion in favor of the death penalty. After extensive proceedings, the court handed down the following sentences. Peter Cantu, Jose Medellin, and Derek O'Brien were sentenced to death. Efrain Perez and Raul Villarreal also received death sentences, later commuted to life without parole after a Supreme Court ruling prohibited the execution of individuals who were minors at the time of their crimes. Venancio Medellin, being very young at the time, was sentenced to 40 years in prison, the maximum possible for someone of that age in Texas. These rulings were met with relief by the victims' families and support from the local community, many of whom had followed the case closely. The trial also brought increased public awareness of violent crime laws in Texas, influencing legal policies in the years to come. The harsh sentences handed down in this case sent a clear message about violent crimes, particularly those involving sexual assault and murder. These sentences brought a measure of justice for the victims' families, though the pain of their loss remains. The fight for justice continues, particularly in preventing early parole for those convicted, ensuring that the severity of the crime is reflected in the punishment.